North Avenue to Techwood Drive, O'Leary to Key. It's WreckTalk!
All right, what is going on, everyone? Welcome back to WreckTalk, and it's week 12. We're winding down this season for the ACC Power Rankings, and this was clearly, I think, the craziest weekend of ACC football we've had yet. We had Louisville lose, who was undefeated in the conference, even with that loss to NC State, and we had Louisville lose, who was probably either them or Pitt, one of the strongest contenders in the conference. We'll talk about all of that, but man, now I've just uploaded a video that's going to come out before this about how the ACC tiebreak rules work, different scenarios, Georgia Tech being in the driver's seat, what does SMU have to do, et cetera. Go check that out if you want some more kind of detail on that. But anyways, we'll take a peek at last week's. We had Louisville at first, even though I would probably change that now, based on how I talked about it before these games were played, and have Pitt there. But we had Louisville first, Pitt, Virginia, Duke, SMU, Georgia Tech. I was really down on Georgia Tech after their defensive showing against NC State. Then we had Syracuse as last, North Carolina, Boston College, Stanford, Virginia Tech. So let's reset things. Let's get back into it. As a matter of fact, I think there's a presentation mode, isn't there? Yeah, presentation mode. Look at that. Why weren't we doing that before? What's our doo-doo tier going to be this week? I think it's just going to be the ACC. It was an absolutely fantastic weekend for Georgia Tech. And I guess Miami. Miami is kind of back in the hunt now. Louisville not necessarily out of making the ACC title game, but the ACC took some big L's over the weekend. We kind of proved, I haven't seen the college football playoff rankings, the updated ones yet, but we kind of proved them right. So let's go through it here. First, Miami at Syracuse. Didn't watch this game. In fact, the only games I did watch were Wake Forest, Virginia. I watched the end of Cal, Louisville. And I watched some of Florida State, Clemson. But not a ton to talk about with Miami, Syracuse. As far as what was on the field, kind of some off the field stuff that got interesting, but that game was tied going into the second quarter. That's pretty embarrassing for Miami. I think Syracuse is clearly the worst team in the conference. In fact, we'll go ahead and put them down here. Syracuse is awful. Fran Brown's an absolute joke, clown. Him and Mario Cristobal had words at one point, didn't they? From across the field yelling at each other. Fran Brown is absolutely melting down. His skin's probably melting. He hasn't showered now going on 6 weeks, right? In fact, after the game, there's a clip on Twitter someone sent me where there's a fan saying, "You stink, you stinky bitch," or something like that. And then Fran Brown's pointing at him, and then he kind of laughs and walks off the field. Look, Fran Brown did well last year going 9-3, obviously, and Jelly going down was killer to Syracuse. They're starting freshman lacrosse players and homeless people they find outside the stadium they put on the bus. But like all the antics of Fran Brown and his stupid shit he does, I think is really, really showing up and hurting them now. In fact, there was like a stare down a little bit between Mario Cristobal and Fran Brown when they shook hands, I want to say. But look, I can't say Miami's a contender right now. I think they got a lot of problems. They need a ton of help to even make an ACC title appearance, which, by the way, is my preferred scenario. I would love it if Georgia Tech won out, the other 4 teams with 1 loss is lost, and somehow Miami snuck in the ACC title for Georgia Tech to beat them. That would serve me just fine. It would be hilarious and great for my channel. But we'll put Miami right there. Another game, not much to say about. SMU beats Boston College 45-13. Jennings throws for 326 yards, 3 touchdowns, ton of yards for their running back, 130 yards. Boston College is awful. In fact, will not surprise me if by the time this video is public that Bill O'Brien has been fired. In fact, let me check my text right now. That's Pigskin Pete. I'm going to make sure he's not saying that he's been fired. Nope. but a lot of rumors of Bill O'Brien being fired. He said stupid things too, kind of like Fran Brown, like, hey, I don't know what's wrong with this team. Like, if I knew what was wrong, I would fix it. He got into it with a reporter too. Like, man, you guys are always being negative. All you reporters are just negative. Once you have people firing off at the press like that, and like in an aggressive way, you know they're about to be fired. This happened with Brian Kelly as well. It's a toss-up between who's the worst team in the conference between Syracuse and Boston College. I tend to think it's Syracuse. I know that they beat Clemson, but they don't have Angeli anymore. One of those teams is going to fire their coach. It's not Syracuse, though. Moving on, Duke loses to UConn. UConn is the ACC killer. They play like 3 or 4 ACC teams this year. I didn't watch the game, but UConn's quarterback throws for over 300 yards. Duke loses to UConn, paying their quarterback, $4 million a year? Let me go look at the box score. What did Mensah throw for? Mensah threw 2 picks in this game. He threw 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 31 of 22. They got outscored, 17-14 in the fourth. They got outscored 20-14 in the first. Like this is awful for the conference. This doesn't count against Duke as an ACC loss. They play Virginia next week. We'll talk about Virginia and that some injury issues they have. I mean, I hate to say it, Duke's just average right now. You can't lose to UConn and be an above average Power 4 team. What's going on at Duke, man? What is going on at Duke? UConn 7-3, by the way. Let's see, who has UConn beat other than Duke this year? UConn lost to Syracuse in a close one. UConn would beat the brakes off Syracuse right now. UConn lost to Delaware 44-41, and they beat Duke. UConn beat Boston College too. UConn is 2-3 against the ACC right now. Do you see why we have the doo-doo tier as ACC? This is like some recursive doo-doo amplification here. I don't even know if that made sense, but I said it. Yeah, Duke should be put as a bad team. We'll hold them as an average Power 4 team right now. North Carolina rattles off 2 conference Power 4 wins in a row. Now, it's against some of the worst teams in the conference. Stanford tried to make a comeback in this game, by the way. They outscored North Carolina 12-10 in the fourth. That brings North Carolina to 4-5. North Carolina might make a bowl. Who does North Carolina have left? Never mind. North Carolina would have to go win 2 of these games, at Wake Forest, Duke, at NC State. Ain't happening. They're losing every one of those games. They would fire Bill Belichick right now if they could. But he's probably getting a little loving from Jordan Hudson there, isn't he? Stanford is awful. I think they're better than both Boston College and Syracuse, though. And UNC is awful, too. All these teams are awful. Is there anyone in disagreement here that all 4 of those teams are absolute dookie? Yeah, I didn't think so. What game do we want to talk about next? We'll talk about Florida State at Clemson. This was kind of a toss-up for me. I did think Clemson was going to win this game. Florida State, another absolute dumpster fire. I'm going to put them as just a bad team right now so we don't have half of our teams in the shit tier. It's embarrassing enough what the conference is at the moment. But one reason the conference is such an embarrassment is Florida State. They're ready to fire Mike Norvell right now. Though they could hold the keys to SMU getting in over Pitt in certain scenarios, which is interesting. Who does Florida State have left? They've got not Virginia. They already played. They got Virginia Tech at NC State at Florida. Virginia Tech's not very good, and they do get Virginia Tech in Tallahassee, but Florida State could lose out. I wouldn't put it past them. Clemson's just bad. Obviously, they just beat Florida State, though. Casanellas throws just barely over 50%, 43 of 23, 250 yards and a touchdown. The leading rusher in this game had 48 yards. Mike Norvell's not long for Florida State, though. I guess they can keep telling themselves that things will be different in the SEC, even though they lost to Stanford. Let that sink in. Let that sink in. You know, they beat Wake Forest 42-7 or whatever last week. They probably thought, oh, yeah. It's kind of like the Enron ride in The Simpsons. Like, oh, we're falling. We broke even. We're all bankrupt. That's what Florida State's like. They're an absolute joke, though. Let's talk about what you clicked on the video for. I streamed Wake Forest at Virginia. Wake Forest struggled to get any semblance of offense going in this game. However, Virginia didn't score a single touchdown. I don't think we didn't have an offensive touchdown in the entire game. Wake Forest scored on a punt return, which was the difference in this game. Now, unfortunately, Virginia's quarterback Morris goes down, probably due to a concussion. I don't know how severe it is. It looked fairly bad. He didn't move for a long time. Something else I want to talk about, that happened because he slid really late. We're seeing a lot of this now where quarterbacks decide to slide late. They draw a penalty, but it's dangerous. Sliding late, for giving yourself up to a defender a millisecond before you get hit is dangerous. I think there needs to be a modification to that rule. Like you can't give yourself, I mean, I guess it would be hard to implement. I feel bad for him. Now, even their backup, his knee got gimped up. They fumbled the ball when he came in, gave Wake Forest back possession. But boy, am I a Wake Forest fan now. Wake Forest basically put the ACC driver's seat solely in Georgia Tech's hands with this because Georgia Tech beat them. They now have wins over SMU and Virginia. So, unfortunate for Virginia. I think their quarterback's going to be out for at least 2 weeks, though. I don't think they're a contender anymore. I think they're going to lose to Duke or Virginia Tech. I'm actually, well, I can't put them behind Miami right now because they just have one loss, but I think Morris going down is killer for Virginia, and I hate to see it. I wish it didn't happen. Wake, I think, is an average team. Now, they play Duke, so they could probably knock Duke out of the race too, assuming the other teams win. But massive win on the road. Massive win on the road for Duke there. Completely opens up the ACC to a ton of different possibilities. That opens it up possibly to Louisville, even with their loss we're going to talk about, or Miami getting in now. What is Louisville doing? It almost makes me want to take back what I said about Jeff Brom. Cal's not a good team. Sagapatuti Dookie is an awful quarterback, and they let him throw for 323 yards and 2 touchdowns. This game went to overtime, and Cal walked it off in overtime. I called this. I switched over the stream for the last, 5 minutes of that game. Cal was able to get a stop in overtime and score. That was the difference in this game. They also hit, was it Cal or Louisville that hit like a 50-yard field goal too? Man, that really puts Louisville behind the 8 ball here. I can't say they're a contender now with as much help as they need, and I'm probably going to have to put them behind Virginia. Actually, I think Virginia's losing another game. I think Louisville could still win out, even though Miller Moss is very hit or miss. How many yards did Miller Moss throw for in that game? Let's go look at the box score. He threw for 203 yards. So he's barely thrown for 300 yards in the past 2 weeks. Miller Moss needs to pick his game up. But that also, in combination with the Wake win, puts Georgia Tech solely in the. If Georgia Tech wins out, they're in. They're in. Huge. So that's all. Were all these teams on a bye? We hadn't ranked Cal. Cal's a bad team. I'm going to put them between Clemson. Hell, they might. I don't know. We'll put them right behind Clemson. Pitt was on a bye this week. Pitt's definitely a contender. I think NC State is on a bye. They're probably an average team. I'll put them average. They did beat Wake, though. We didn't rank SMU. SMU's a contender right now. I think Virginia Tech was on a bye. They're pretty bad. We'll put them behind Florida State. And then I'm moving Georgia Tech back up to 1. I think it's Georgia Tech, Pitt, SMU. One of those teams is making the ACC title. I'm almost certain of. Now, Georgia Tech plays Pitt, so one of those teams is most likely going to be out. Not in all scenarios, but most likely whoever I'll put it this way. That's going to be Haynes King's last home game at Bobby Dodd because the Georgia Tech game's at the Benz. He could seal an ACC title berth with a win against Pitt at Bobby Dodd. But Georgia Tech, that matchup is all wrong for Georgia Tech. I know a lot of Georgia Tech fans probably flame me for saying it, but that matchup is all wrong. Probably the best passing offense in the conference. In Pitt, they got a pretty good defense too. For certain, I think Georgia Tech or Pitt is making it. Now, Pitt could lose to Miami. So Pitt's got Notre Dame, they've got Georgia Tech, and then they've got Miami. So ideally, Pitt would lose, or Pitt would beat Notre Dame, lose to Georgia Tech, and beat Miami. Pitt beating Notre Dame is critical. I still don't know that the ACC would get 2 teams in, but if they do, they probably have to beat Notre Dame. So that's our list here. I don't think anyone can compete for a national title out of the conference right now. The conference is a dumpster fire at the moment. But we got Georgia Tech at 1, Pitt. Georgia Tech won the bye week, didn't they? If a team's ever won the bye week, Georgia Tech won it. So we got Georgia Tech, Pitt, SMU, Louisville, Virginia, Miami, Duke, and then we got Syracuse dead last. I don't know that anyone's going to disagree with that. You might. I don't think anyone could disagree with Boston College. One of them is the worst team in the conference. Then we got Stanford, UNC, Virginia Tech, Florida State, Cal. Let me know what you guys think. Where are we right? Where are we wrong? What do you think about what we said about your team? We'll talk to you guys next time.